Spring Chicken, read and written by Chloe Huntington. 6:45 a.m. The sun rose like it normally did on a crisp spring morning. I heard scraping. Scraping? I opened one of my eyes. I glanced down at the sight of my feathery sisters leaving their bedrooms to enter a big chicken palace. I knew I needed to get up. I watched as my dark, ginger sister Jessie clucked a loud cluck as she told the neighbourhood we were all awake. My legs rose, and my monochrome body followed as I observed my violet-feathered sister Billy next to me. "Good morning," I cooed to Billy as I nudged her sleepy body to the right. Billy's dark chocolate eyes opened with a startle. I watched as her eyes focused upon me. "What's going on, Camille?" Billy squawked. I looked at her calmly. "It's the morning, Billy," I clucked. Billy looked confused for a moment before she shook her head in irritation. Her body rose from her grey legs as she gave me a little frustrated peck on the head. "Hey," I squawked at her. "What was that for?" I watched as Billy ignored my squawk. She made her way to the feeder and started aggressively devouring the pellets that were our breakfast. I, on the other hand, headed to the water drinker. I scooped up a mouthful with my beak and tipped my head back. I felt the water drip down my throat. I was now becoming cooler with every small mouthful. I stopped drinking and preened myself for a moment. I wanted to make sure that I looked the best that I possibly could, but I was interrupted. Her name is Bluebell. She stood over me as the leader of the pecking order. Her pitch-black eyes stared into my small soul. Her grey feathers, as puffy as they were, intimidated me. Her long neck rose above me. Her razor-sharp beak quickly stabbed into my head to show her power over me. She pecked until I cowered beneath her. My squawk sounded like a scream. Suddenly, I rose to my feet from my cower. I ran away from her as fast as I could and jumped up onto the roof of the coop. This was my safe space. Bluebell couldn't follow me there. I glanced down at my sisters from the roof. My neck was throbbing in pain. I noticed my speckled sister Willow join me on the roof. "Are you okay?" Willow cooed to me. I looked at her and put my head down so she could see what Bluebell had done to me. "Ah," she clucked. I noticed that Willow was slowly walking towards me. She stopped beside me. "I'm sorry, sister," Willow cooed to me. I nodded my head in appreciation. The sound of the back door creaked open. All of my sisters huddled up at the coop door in anticipation for who was entering the garden. It was a young woman, our regular woman, who feeds us and gives us treats. What was that in her hand? A bowl. She walked into the coop and chucked the contents of the bowl all around the coop. Apples without the seeds. Perfect. She gave me an apple which she had pre-cut for us on the roof. I pecked the apple at a fast pace. I wanted to get the taste of the juicy apple in my mouth. The woman stayed in the coop for a short moment before gathering her things. This was my one chance. I stood along the roof of the bedroom until it was time for the woman to leave. The coop door opened and my neck straightened out as I scanned for my landing zone. I then jumped. My black and white wings flapped rapidly. As I landed, my claws dug into the soft grass beneath my scaled feet. I was now out in the abyss of the back garden. I heard the woman release a panicked shriek. I had escaped. She shut the door rapidly to prevent any more escape, and she ran to the shed to fetch her gloves. I, on the other hand, walked slowly around the garden. I scratched at a small patch of grass before pecking at it, and then eating what I'd scratched up. I then looked as the woman was heading towards me with her gloves on. She was trying to remain unnoticed as she crept towards me. Our eyes met each other. "Camille, please come back in," I heard the woman mumble. I hadn't finished with my patch of grass. I heard the woman call for me to come back into my home, but now I was out. I didn't want to go back in straight away. I ran towards the shed at speed, but something on the ground caught my eye. It was a worm. My distraction wriggled and tempted me. My body froze, my eyes locked in the target. I waited to strike. The worm moved itself once more. I ran towards it and scooped it into my mouth. My head tilted back as I swallowed it. The flavours of the worm filled my mouth. It was so much better than my dinner pellets. But then I noticed that the woman was no longer where she was standing by the door. She had moved. My neck rose, and I moved my head around to locate her. But before my eyes could find her, something scooped me up. Warmth surrounded my body, as I was now tucked under the woman's armpit and headed towards the coop. I made an unappreciative noise. She opened the door and plopped me back onto the roof of the chicken coop. I then shook myself until my feathers became puffed up and fluffy. I scratched my head and cleaned my feathers from my garden adventure. I watched as the woman went back into her home. I went into my bedroom hutch to lay in. I lowered my body and began scratching and rubbing myself within the hay. I flicked the hay within my feathery wings and arranged the room to be most comfortable for me. I stuck my head out of the hutch and saw darkness slowly fall upon the chicken coop. Billy and Willow joined me on the roof. I slowly rose from my hay bath and exited my room. I then gracefully headed to the door where I slept. Billy followed me. I lowered my body onto the door and watched my sister copy. She lowered her body and snuggled beside me. I looked down as Bluebell entered the coop on the ground floor. Jessie followed pursuit. Willow wasn't comfortable on the roof with us. She jumped down and headed to the first floor of the coop. I heard my sisters make small coo noises as they made themselves comfortable for bed. I stayed awake for a few more minutes before my eyes fluttered shut, and I fell into a peaceful sleep.